what's up, everybody? Steve Schwartz here from LSAT Unplugged, joining you today to share more information on the developing news story about law schools dropping out of the US news rankings. Before I get into it, please do me a favor, like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It really helps with that YouTube algorithm, and I really do appreciate it. So, the news story. For those who aren't aware, last week, Yale and Harvard law schools both announced they were dropping out of the US news rankings. They would no longer submit information to US news. Since then, Yale and Harvard have been joined by Georgetown, Columbia, Stanford, and just today, the University of Michigan Law School. Now, why are these law schools dropping out of the US news rankings? One of their big stated reasons is that they don't like the fact that the US news rankings incentivize law schools to award merit scholarships to applicants and to essentially buy applicants with high LSAT scores and GPAs to help those law schools raise their status in the rankings. The law schools argue that this takes away much needed financial aid from those who have financial need. So in other words, you have merit scholarships on the one hand and need-based scholarships on the other hand. Fair point. In my video last week, I argued my suspicion that actually what's really going on here is that law schools are looking to create a sort of loophole to continue practicing affirmative action even after the Supreme Court will likely ban that practice next year. Check out that video for the in-depth version of that argument, which I'm linking below this video. Today, I want to talk a bit more about the scholarships aspect of things. What does it mean that when they say that merit-based scholarships are taking away from financial or need-based scholarships, and that US news is causing a problem here for students with serious financial need? A big way that law schools raise their status in the US news rankings is to award merit-based scholarships to applicants. Let's say a law school had a hypothetical LSAT median of 170. They could admit a lot of students with LSAT scores above that 170, and then that would contribute to the school potentially rising in the rankings. So if a law school offers a significant merit scholarship to an applicant with a 173, the applicant might choose that school. When the school is able to submit information about that applicant and others like that applicant to US News, that school will then have a higher LSAT median. If the school can do this for applicant after applicant, if the school had a large pool of merit-based scholarship money available, then they would essentially be able to raise their LSAT medians simply by handing out money to lure or woo applicants to their school in particular. If a school has a hypothetical large pool of merit-based scholarship money available, the school can essentially buy lots of applicants with LSAT scores above that school's current median. And as a result, the school would be able to raise their LSAT medians and give themselves a boost in the rankings by attracting lots of applicants with that scholarship money who have the high LSAT scores. Now, Yale, Harvard, and other law schools make an argument that because schools are incentivized to give out lots of merit-based scholarship money due to their rankings, they have less money available for need-based financial aid, which prevents applicants who have significant financial need from getting the aid who really truly need the money versus the students receiving merit-based aid who may have enough money to pay for law school, but simply are getting discounts on tuition because they're getting lots of merit-based aid. Now, are the schools pulling out of US news rankings simply out of the goodness of their hearts because they're concerned about applicants with serious financial need not getting the aid that they need? It's entirely possible, but I'm inclined to look at other motivations that, aside from the ones that are stated on their websites and aside from those stated in their press releases and comments to news organizations. What are the schools' incentives? After all, if the schools were incentivized to buy applicants with LSAT scores above their current medians, and they respond to those incentives, might they now also be responding to other incentives by choosing to pull out of the rankings entirely? What occurs to me is that these schools have been an arms race or a battle for applicants. They're competing over applicants with high LSAT scores and high GPAs looking to dole out more and more money to different applicants to attract the applicants to their law school in particular. Georgetown and Columbia are at odds with each other, competing over the same applicant, and they are then incentivized to offer more and more scholarship money. So the schools have now bounded together. Yale, Harvard, Berkeley, Georgetown, Columbia, Stanford, and now University of Michigan, they've all banded together, and essentially they're saying, we don't want to play the rankings game anymore. We don't want to compete with each other anymore, offering more and more money to applicants because we have a limited pool of money available. Not because they necessarily want to give that money to those who have significant financial need, but maybe the schools just want to keep it for themselves. Obviously, these schools will certainly offer need-based aid to a certain extent. Yale actually has offered over 50 students tuition-free scholarships. These students are paying zero to go to Yale, and they have serious financial need. That's the basis on which they were given this scholarship money. However, the other schools are saying, I think, we want to stop paying out all this money in scholarships. The rankings are the reason we are giving out so much money in merit-based aid. Let's simply bound together and say, we're not going to do it anymore. And then Yale, Harvard, and those who are following are all joining the bandwagon and saying, hey, these U.S. News rankings are a bad deal for us because they actually cause us to spend more and more money on scholarships when we have limited budgets to do so. If we can't compete by giving out more scholarships, we will then lose or reduce our status in the rankings relative to other law schools that have deeper pockets or more money to spend on merit-based financial aid. The next question is, why now? Why at the end of 2022 are law schools suddenly deciding that they don't want to play the rankings merit-based scholarship game anymore? One reason I advocated or advanced in my last video about this was the coming Supreme Court decision that will likely ban the practice of race-based affirmative action. Schools are vocalizing, they're voicing their opinion that they want to reduce the extent to which they consider LSAT and GPA in their admissions decisions. And then that would relatively elevate the status of soft factors like application essays in the admissions process. Have the LSAT and GPA suddenly become less relevant to them in making their admissions decisions? I would say that's probably unlikely. But if they want to increase racial diversity at their law schools, even when affirmative action is banned by the Supreme Court, which it almost certainly will be next year, the schools can say vocally, we're going to pay more attention to softs, less attention to LSAT and GPA, and then that will give them cover or a pretext of sorts to admit applicants with relatively lower LSAT scores and GPAs. And they can do so for underrepresented minorities in particular, which will then allow them to increase the diversity of their classes relative to what it would have been otherwise. They may not do this for all applicants, URM or non-URM, because then that would drop their LSAT median significantly, but this gives them a pretext to continue the practice of race-based affirmative action by admitting URMs with lower LSAT scores and GPAs than they otherwise would have. Now, the argument for the merit-based financial aid, why is that suddenly incredibly important to law schools now at the end of 2022? Well, I want to share with you a reason I think is a demographic reason that a lot of folks are not yet aware of, but soon will be. In order to explain this, I have to rewind a little bit, so just bear with me for a moment. Since the year 2007, the US birth rate has dropped 20%. What's the initial reason? Likely the recession of 2008, the financial crisis. The economy was bad. Folks delayed having kids. Some even decided not to have kids entirely. And so as a result, there will be fewer people applying to college in 2026 and fewer applying to law school in the year 2030. Colleges and universities are acutely aware of this. This is an existential crisis for them since they are set up, their operating expenses are set up to accommodate the current number of students, not the current number minus 20%. As a result, schools will increasingly become more financially conscious. They will become more budget conscious, and they're looking to save money where they can each year more and more as we get closer to 2026 for undergrad and 2030 for law school. What this means is that schools will want to devote less money to financial aid if they can, because for a lot of schools, tuition dollars are where they get their revenue from. If they have to keep giving out all this money in financial aid, they will not be able to meet their operating expenses. The number of administrators in particular has ballooned over this same period. So you have a lot more overhead, a lot more support staff that is not directly related to generating revenue. Tuition is the main source for a lot of schools, for a lot of universities, especially those without huge endowments. So I think that more and more schools will join this bandwagon to refuse to submit to the US News rankings in protest of the incentives it creates around this battle between schools to attract applicants by doling out significant financial aid. So will all the money that is currently going to merit aid be moved over to need-based financial aid? I'm not so sure. I suspect that maybe some of it will, but a lot of it will remain in the schools' pockets, remain in their coffers for the difficult times ahead for the schools as fewer and fewer applicants apply, as they may need to lower their LSAT medians in turn to attract the same number of applicants. So those are my thoughts here. I will have another video coming out very soon, likely this week, with more on this demographic cliff, with more on the drop in applicants coming in the next decade or so, and what this will mean for law school admissions. Anyway, folks, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It really does help, and I really do appreciate it. In the meantime, I wish you all the best, and take care. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best, and take care.